In the wild, a single act of kindness can change everything. Years after saving a baby bear, a man discovers just how deep the bond goes when the bear saves his family. The wind howled through the dense Alaskan wilderness, its icy breath curling around towering pines and blanketing the ground in thick, unyielding snow. The trees, stoic and ancient, groaned under the weight of winter's grip. The air was cold enough to freeze a man's thoughts, crisp and sharp, a sulther, biting at exposed skin like tiny daggers. For miles in every direction, there was nothing but the vast, untouched land, an untamed world where silence reigned, broken only by the occasional creak of a tree branch or the distant call of a raven. In this frigid, desolate beauty, Ethan Carter had found his refuge. Ethan was a man who had long since abandoned the trappings of civilization. His cabin, nestled between the thick pines near a frozen river, was his home, his sanctuary. A former wildlife photographer, he had once traveled the globe, chasing fleeting moments of rare beauty through the lens of a camera. But tragedy had brought him here. His wife's death, a grief that shattered him and left him seeking solace in solitude. Now he lived by the rhythm of nature, a quiet existence where his days revolved around the forest's harsh demands. Ethan had become a survivalist of sorts, relying on his deep knowledge of the wilderness to carve out a life in its unforgiving embrace. On this particular morning, as the sun barely kissed the horizon, casting long shadows over the snow, Ethan went on his usual morning walk. He breathed in the crisp air, the scent of pine and cold earth filling his lungs. But today something was different. A faint whimper, soft, pitiful, reached his ears, carried by the wind. Ethan froze, his instincts sharp. His eyes scanned the snowy landscape, searching for the source of the sound. And then he saw it. A baby bear, trembling and trapped in a steel poacher's trap. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he took cautious steps toward the trapped bear. His breath came in short, shallow bursts, the cold air condensing into visible clouds before dissipating. The snow crunched beneath his boots, breaking the otherwise haunting silence of the wilderness. As he drew closer, his mind raced. The tiny bear, no older than a few months, whimpered weakly, its eyes wide with fear and pain. Its fur, once thick and glossy, was matted with the blood seeping from its injured leg, the trap cruelly pinning it down. The tension in the air was palpable. Ethan's instincts screamed that the bear's mother could be nearby, waiting for the right moment to attack. A mother bear was fiercely protective, and if she sensed an intruder near her cub, Ethan knew he would be in grave danger. His mind replayed countless survival tactics he had learned over the years, but no amount of training could truly prepare him for the unpredictable nature of wild animals, especially a protective mother bear. Ethan crouched down, his posture as non-threatening as possible. He slowly extended his hand towards the cub, speaking softly, his voice steady but low. "Hey there, little one. I'm not going to hurt you. Just hold on, okay?" His voice was almost a whisper, carried by the wind to the frightened creature. The baby bear's golden brown eyes, wide with panic, locked onto Ethan's. The fear was evident in its gaze, but there was a flicker of understanding too. Ethan's calloused hands trembled slightly as he reached for the trap, the metal cold and unforgiving. His breath came faster, his fingers stiff with the effort to maneuver the mechanism that held the bear captive. The tension built in the air as Ethan worked quickly but carefully, trying to maintain a calm that he didn't feel. Every second he spent here could be the moment the mother bear decided to charge, and the closer he got to the cub, the more it seemed to sense his presence. With a final twist of his wrist, the trap clicked open. The baby bear let out a pained cry as its leg was freed, and for a split second, Ethan feared it would collapse. The wound was deep, and it was clear the bear had been struggling for hours, maybe even days. But it wasn't in a state to fight anymore. Ethan's heart wrenched. He quickly ran his hand along the baby bear's head, trying to soothe it. "Easy now, I've got you. You're safe." His voice was as gentle as he could make it, trying to offer reassurance despite the looming threat of danger. The cub's soft fur was warm under his touch, a comforting sensation amidst the chaos of the moment. The bear whined in pain but didn't pull away. Instead, it nuzzled his hand, a gentle, trusting gesture that took Ethan by surprise. It was as if the animal knew he had done it no harm. Slowly, the bear pulled itself up, wincing with each movement. He took a few unsteady steps, limping on its injured leg but managing to move toward the edge of the forest. Ethan watched as the bear paused and turned to face him. For a long moment, their eyes locked, human and animal, connected in a shared moment of trust and understanding. Then, with a soft grunt, the baby bear turned and hobbled away, disappearing into the thick trees. Ethan stood there, motionless, his breath visible in the frigid air. He knew that the encounter had been nothing short of miraculous. In that fleeting moment, the wild had revealed its fragile, vulnerable side to him. And in that same moment, something had changed between him and the bear. A bond had been formed, one he couldn't explain but would never forget. Little did he know that this small, wounded cub would play a far larger role in his life than he could ever have imagined. Years passed, and life in the wilderness had remained mostly unchanged for Ethan. The quiet solitude of his existence was familiar, comforting even. He had grown accustomed to the rhythmic ebb and flow of nature, each season bringing its own beauty and challenges. The towering pines outside his cabin still stood as guardians of his small world, and the wind, ever constant, still whispered secrets through the trees. But there was a coldness now, one that went beyond the sharp winter winds and the biting chill of the snow. The warmth he had once felt in the company of the forest and its creatures had dulled, replaced by a sense of unease that settled in his bones. The wilderness, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now seemed different, distant, even hostile in its silence. One evening, as Ethan prepared to close up his cabin for the night, a shadow flickered outside the window. He froze, his instincts sharpening instantly. It was a wolf, a large, shadowy figure creeping through the snow near his porch. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he watched it, but before he could move, another appeared, and then another. Soon, there were more, at least 5, pacing back and forth, circling his cabin with calculated patience. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He had seen wolves before, but this felt different. These weren't just animals hunting for food. They were predators, watching, waiting for something. The forest, it seemed, was no longer the safe refuge it had once been. Ethan's grip tightened on the axe at his side. He was no stranger to danger, but the growing sense of menace in the air told him that something bigger was coming. Something he was not prepared for. The night was darker than usual, the snow falling heavier and faster than it had in days. Inside the cabin, Ethan's wife Sarah and their young son Luke were finishing dinner, unaware of the danger creeping closer by the second. Ethan's senses, always alert, were on high alert now, a primal instinct telling him that something was wrong. The wolves had been circling his cabin for days, but tonight, their presence felt more aggressive, more focused. The hair on the back of his neck prickled as he heard the low growls and the faint sound of paws pressing into the snow. Ethan's heart raced, knowing that if they had begun hunting in earnest, it would be his family they were after. His mind flashed back to the many nights spent alone, when the wilderness had been his only company. Now, it was a stark reminder of how quickly danger could strike. He glanced back at Sarah and Luke, oblivious to the threat. Ethan could hear Sarah humming in the kitchen, the sound peaceful, yet it grated against his mounting tension. He had to act, and fast. He grabbed his rifle, making sure it was loaded, then cautiously stepped outside. The cold air hit him like a slap to the face. He scanned the perimeter of the cabin, his eyes narrowing as the growls grew louder. The sound of the pack closing in. His breath came out in visible clouds as he surveyed the trees, searching for movement in the darkness. And then, just as the first of the wolves crept into the clearing, Ethan heard a loud rustle from the trees. His heart skipped a beat. From the edge of the forest, a massive shape emerged, an adult bear, easily twice the size of the ones he had seen years ago. The fur was thick, matted with snow, and there was a commanding presence about it that sent a shiver down his spine. But it wasn't just the bear. Behind it were 2 smaller figures, cubs, grown now, but unmistakable. It was the same baby bear he had saved years ago, now an adult, standing tall and proud in the face of the wolves. His instincts told him this wasn't just a coincidence. The bear had come back, not just to thank him, but to protect. Ethan's throat tightened as he realized that this creature, once vulnerable and afraid, was now his ally. The wolves froze, sensing the change in the air. The bear let out a deep, guttural growl, its breath visible in the cold night. Without hesitation, it charged. The wolves scattered, momentarily stunned, but they quickly regrouped, launching themselves at the bear. The massive creature swiped its paw with terrifying speed, knocking the closest wolf aside. With a roar, the bear slammed into the pack, its movements swift and powerful, sending the wolves into a frenzy. Ethan watched in stunned silence, helpless. His rifle hung loosely in his grip, forgotten as the bear battled the wolves. It was a primal dance, graceful, yet violent. The wolves' attacks were swift, but the bear was stronger, more ferocious, and it fought with a determination that spoke of loyalty and gratitude. The fight was over in a matter of minutes, though it felt like hours. The remaining wolves fled, their snarls retreating into the night as they disappeared back into the wilderness. Ethan stood there, breathless, his heart pounding, watching the bear and its cubs. The beast looked back at him, its eyes locking onto his for a moment, before it turned, leading the cubs back into the darkness of the woods. Ethan's legs trembled, his mind racing. What had just happened? The bear had saved his family. There was no other way to explain it. It had come back, not out of a sense of obligation, but out of a bond forged in the wilderness. A bond that had transcended the simple act of saving a life. Ethan watched as the bear and its cubs disappeared into the forest, and in that moment, he knew that the wilderness wasn't just a place of danger, it was also a place of unexpected bonds. Loyalty and unspoken gratitude. His family was safe, thanks to a bear he had once saved. The wolves, defeated and wary, retreated into the shadows of the trees. Their snarls faded, replaced by the heavy silence of the night. Ethan stood there, his breath still labored, his mind reeling from the fight that had just unfolded before him. The bear, now standing proudly in the clearing, was the only figure between Ethan's cabin and the retreating pack. Its massive form was imposing yet regal, its muscles rippling beneath its thick fur. The snow around it was stained with the chaos of battle, but the bear stood tall and unyielding. Ethan's eyes met the bear's, those same brown eyes that had once been filled with fear and pain, now full of strength and resolve. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The world around him felt distant, and all he could focus on was the connection between them. This wasn't just a wild animal he had saved long ago. This was something more. The bear wasn't just showing up to repay an act of kindness, it had come back to protect. The weight of the moment settled heavily on Ethan's chest. He thought of the long years of solitude, of living out here in the wilderness, surrounded by the harsh, unforgiving elements. He had never expected that one of the creatures he had tried to help would return in such a powerful way. The kindness he had shown that baby bear had come full circle, and in doing so, it had saved his family. It was a bond forged by the wilderness, by shared survival, and by an unspoken understanding that ran deeper than any words could express. Ethan turned slowly, his gaze moving back to the cabin where Sarah and Luke were peering out through the windows, watching the scene unfold from a safe distance. They were safe. The bear had done what no one else could. It had ensured their protection, and in doing so, it had reminded Ethan of something vital. The world wasn't as cold as it seemed. Even in the darkest corners of the wilderness, there was room for kindness and loyalty. With a final glance, the bear turned, its large form slowly disappearing back into the trees. The cubs followed, trailing behind their mother. As the bear faded into the night, it paused once more. It turned its head, locking eyes with Ethan one last time. In that fleeting moment, Ethan understood. The bear was leaving, not out of obligation, but because its mission was complete. It had fulfilled its promise. The night grew quiet, save for the gentle rustle of wind through the trees. Ethan stood alone in the clearing, a mixture of gratitude and awe filling his chest. The wilderness, with all its dangers, had shown him something profound that night. That kindness, no matter how small, could echo through the years, bringing unexpected protection in return. He finally turned, stepping toward the warmth of the cabin, where his family awaited. The danger had passed, but the emotional weight of the bear's return would stay with him forever. Ethan stood quietly on the porch, the cold wind now a gentle whisper around him. The battle was over, the wolves gone, and the danger had passed. But his mind raced, replaying the moment when the bear had appeared, when it had stood between his family and certain death. How had it known? How had it come back to repay the kindness he had shown so long ago? He glanced up at the dark sky, the stars shining down like pinpricks in the vast expanse of the wilderness. The world felt different now, quieter somehow, as if the land itself had witnessed something sacred. Ethan had always thought of survival as a matter of strength, of knowing how to endure the cold, how to track prey, how to protect himself. But tonight had taught him something more. It wasn't just about physical strength or knowledge of the land. It was about the choices we make, the kindness we show, and the bonds we form with the world around us. The bear had returned not because it owed him anything, but because it recognized the connection they shared, something beyond the simple predator-prey relationship. The bear had remembered his act of mercy, and in return, it had saved him and his family. Ethan felt a deep, quiet peace settle over him. He turned back toward the cabin, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The dangers of the wilderness were always present, but tonight, he had witnessed something rare. He had learned that kindness, whether given to a fellow human or a wild creature, was as vital to survival as any skill or weapon. As he stepped inside, the warmth of the fire and the soft laughter of his family greeted him. The world outside may have been wild and unforgiving, but here, with his family, he felt safe. He had protected them once, and now the wilderness had protected him. The circle had come full circle. As the story of Ethan and the bear comes to a close, it leaves us with a powerful reminder. Kindness transcends the boundaries of species and circumstance. The bond formed in the wild between man and bear proves that in a world so often defined by struggle, compassion can create unexpected alliances. Survival is more than just strength. It's about the choices we make and the lives we touch along the way. Viewer engagement prompt. Do you believe in the power of kindness in the wild? If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe for more incredible moments of survival, courage, and wildlife connections. Let's explore the untold stories of the wilderness together.